this on. So there's this little device here, and some schools have them, a lot of teachers use them. Have you seen one of these before? It's called a Mobi. It's an interactive Interwrite board that allows me to control my screen from this. It's Bluetooth enabled. Now the caveat with this, for me anyway, is that the software, when I got this, they did not have a Mac version. And so they did not have a Mac version, and what that meant was that I had to use a PC. And these are PCs, the computers in the classroom, but I was not allowed to use, I couldn't download it on this PC, because then you have to have a site license, because it's at the university, and we didn't buy the site license, which is like supremely expensive. So the only PC laptop that I could acquire was this netbook that's like forever old, slow. And so I'm not gonna do the whole lesson with the Mobi using this. I tried it last semester and it was very frustrating because it's so slow. But I understand that they are, maybe even have come out with a Mac version. So I need to check and find out. They said it was coming, and at the time it was not ready. So hopefully I can get that downloaded onto my MacBook Air so that it will be more smooth. But there's a stylus, and it's Bluetooth enabled. You can see this little grid up here. Let me see. So by clicking, I can move through the lesson. I can also annotate. I can write things and draw pictures. It's actually working better now. I'm just like scribbling if I were to write my name. So you can annotate, and you can be moving around the classroom, and you can even give it to people, students, and let them. I used to use it in chemistry, like balancing equations, and we'd be watching, and students could practice and whatnot. So it's kind of a fun thing to use. So this is called a Mobi, M-O-B-I. It's another example of some educational technology that's great for classroom management purposes because you're not locked to the computer. Okay, so I've asked you to write down what you know about differentiating instruction, and I'll take those if you haven't already given them to me and you are finished. Thank you. And okay, the expectations for the lesson today, very similar to last time. We'll collaboratively participate, respect, stay on task, raise your hand when you're finished. So you're going to be working in groups, and this raising your hand, you may find that that's not necessary because it's very apparent to me when you're done. But sometimes that's a good way to say, okay, we're ready to move on to the next thing. Okay, so M&Ms. You've got some M&Ms on your at your table. Somebody gets to decide who gets that. You can flip for it, fight for it, whatever you want to do. But take your pack of M&Ms, and I'm going to and I want you to open them up. Hey, okay, go ahead. Open them up, and you're going to get to eat them eventually, so you might want to put them on something that you feel comfortable in laying them out on. And I want you to separate them into colors. Now, I have to a disclaimer or transparency. So finding bag M&Ms, like little bags of M&Ms, is kind of hard anymore. They're mostly selling those big old bags, with the Ziploc sort of thing. But because it's Valentine's coming up, they have these little Valentine ones, and I didn't realize that was the case. So you may not find your colors represented in a moment, but I will give you some options, Philip, in place of some of these colors. All right. So separate them according to color. So all your blues and reds and browns and greens. Okay, oh, you've got a lot to separate there. Okay, you're still working at it. Okay, so if you, upside down on your table is a little packet. If you'll flip it over, there's an activity sheet on top. This activity sheet is for you, and I want you to write down how many of those different colors. Now, I think Philip, you might be the only one with the pink ones. And it's so pretty. Okay, so for you, the white is ELL, which would be the orange. And the light pink is the green, the average. The red is special education. And the medium pink is economically disadvantaged. Okay. How many of you have a majority of average students in your, these represent your students, by the way, in your classroom. How many of you have a majority of average students? So green is average. How many of you have at least one behavior problem? Okay, what about 2, 3 behavior problems? How many behavior problems you got, Brianna? 2. 2? How many of you got? 7. Oh, buddy. Sorry. What about economically disadvantaged? How many of you have several of economically disadvantaged? Okay, so Jake is working in a more affluent school, economically disadvantaged. What about at least one English language learner? Okay. And what about any gifted? Anybody you have a gifted student? Okay. Special education? Okay. So when I was teaching, I taught chemistry and physics, and I taught at a pre-K-12 school, rural Eagleville, which has a lot of Murfreesboro students that come as well. So people think, well, the kids at Eagleville are farmers. You know, no, they're not. Or they're all hunt and fit. No, they don't. There's a wide variety. In one of the classes I taught, Principles of Technology, which is the applied physics class, at one time, a number of years ago, my students that had me for chemistry would, a lot of those would then turn around and take Principles of Technology with me. And so they were seniors, lots of times very high averages, 4.0. And then the Department of Education said all students need to have either chemistry or physics to graduate. Well, the mathematics and chemistry is very challenging. And so with Principles of Technology, applied physics, there's PT1 and PT2, and together they counted as a physics credit, and it was very hands-on, lower level algebra-based mathematics. And so at our school, and in most schools that had PT, Principles of Technology, it was deemed that students who struggled with math, lower level achieving students, would take PT. So then it happened that in my PT classes, I would have 4.0 seniors, and I would have sophomores who literally could not read. Not that they were unintelligent, but they could not read, and everything in between. And so you talk about having to differentiate some instruction. Kids were doing different things all the time, going towards the same goal, but how they were getting there was different, very challenging. So you may find that it's possible that you could have a classroom full of average students, but even within those average students, they still have different interests, they have different readiness, different learning profiles. So it's likely that you're going to encounter different kinds of students. So the driving question in this inquiry, because all inquiries have a driving question, is how am I going to meet all the needs of these students, each of these students, in my class all the time? That is your driving question. It's on your activity sheet there. So that's what's going to drive this instruction. How am I going to do this? So our learning targets for today. Jake, will you read the first one for me?
I can define differentiated instruction and assessment.
Okay, so the language function there is the verb. What's the verb in that sentence?
Define.
Define. So that's sort of low level, just sort of give a definition. Eileen, would you read the second one?
I can explain to whom I should differentiate instruction.
Okay, and maybe we could add assessment to that, but for whom should I differentiate? So what's the language function in that?
Explain.
Explain, so that's a little higher on Bloom's taxonomy, be able to explain. And then read the third one, Jessica.
I can explain why I should differentiate instruction.
Okay, so we're gonna explain to whom, for whom, and why. So both of those are explained. And then Philip, if you'll read the last one.
I can describe differentiation strategies.
Okay, so describe is that language function, right? So we're gonna be doing a multiple of things here, lots of information, and this is sort of an introductory lesson. I'm gonna be perusing this to kind of see what your background, some people have more background knowledge than others. I would like to say I set down the Spanish version for you. I have a student with dysgraphia. Have you ever heard of dysgraphia? Dysgraphia is a condition where the student has trouble writing. It's sort of this a processing thing from here to here for writing words, but lots of times drawing is a good option, interestingly enough, for those students. So a student with dysgraphia, we would want to modify instruction so that they would write when they were able, but they could also draw pictures. You could also audio record or video record responses to help that student. And then a struggling reader, providing simpler forms, having someone they felt comfortable with, a buddy that could help you out. Okay, so here we have a student. Tell me what you think about this student. What is the message from this student?
Distracted.
Distracted?
Kind of bored.
Could be bored. Yeah, there's not much into it. All right. What is that? Tell me about this student.
ELL.
Could be. Well, it could be a Latino. Does he look interested?
Yes.
We have his attention. Yeah. We don't know. We can't really read if he's angry or just like really focused in. Not sure. Okay. What about this student?
Frustrated.
Could be very frustrated, struggling. Okay. Tell me about this student. Physical disability. So she's got some modifications there for playing the cymbal. Pretty cool. All right, tell me about this student.
He's a little angry.
I think this looks fantastic on these papers.
Could be angry. I don't know. I kind of see almost a smile there. I don't know. Depends
I
on how you
think-
read it.
I think he's a little upset that he has to look up from the book to take a picture.
Right.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, you're bothering me, man.
Yeah.
Could be. Could
Get
be.
the camera out of my face.
I see him as engaged. Okay. What about this young lady?
Also engaged.
Engaged.
Should be in school, but not.
Should be in school. What are you doing, man?
He's
the guy who skipped
in
school.
Yeah.
We certainly, we can't be sure. I wanted to have a variety of pictures representing different ethnicities and levels of engagement or frustration or what have you. Your students, you could have a whole classroom of students looking similar to these folks. Okay, so many of you will be teaching in the state of Tennessee, some of you may not, but I have pulled data from the 15-16 academic year to give you a sense of some demographics for the state of Tennessee. So as of this academic year, 64% white, 24% black, 9% Hispanic, 2% Asian. Our ELL population is increasing. 5% ELL, 35% economically disadvantaged, 14% disabled. How do we determine economic disadvantage? Do you have an idea what it's based on?
Is it the poverty line, or is it just a free and reduced?
It's free and reduced lunch. So if students qualify for free and reduced lunch, then we say that they are low economic status, and that's the measuring point for that. Okay, that's sort of hard to see here, but I've put a couple of copies that you might need to share. So I'm going to slide this over and let you guys share, and then you guys can share. Looking at this, so on the far left of these bar graphs, what is on the screen is orange, and I have put a work order for these TVs to start working. Hopefully it will happen. But this orange is below basic. that takes up the majority for many of these core content areas. The gray is approaching basic, that sort of greenish is on track, and the blue is mastered, so advanced. So looking, the level of mastery and sort of proficient is not as high as I'd like to see. There's challenges that you're gonna face about, and this is you know, core academics, it doesn't include the non-tested subjects, obviously. But I do want to point something out about this year. In the year 15-16 was the first year that the 10 Ready test came out. It's the year, during that year, it was supposed to be done electronically on the computers, and then the system crashed. And then there was a waiting time before they sent out paper versions. Some of the paper versions were, some pages were right side up, some were down, upside down, some were missing. And it was sort of a farce, very embarrassing, and then the student said it's not gonna count, but it counted for teachers. So if it's not gonna count, the students are told that, they might not put a whole lot of effort to it, right? So while this data is not a really good representation, if you this is on the state report card, you can look this information up. Look at previous years, which was the old test. And I need to check, because this is my PowerPoint from last semester. I should see if 16-17 is up. Maybe I need to update these, but anyway, you'll still find that we're not where we should be. So there's challenges. Some of that has to do with the demographics, some of it has to do with just challenges that students have. And you're gonna have students who are certainly capable, but they've got challenges. They are not eating, they don't have enough food, they're not sleeping well, they're taking care of siblings. The Murfreesboro City Schools offers free lunches for breakfast and lunch for all of their students, regardless of their ability to pay. And you think about it, even a student who's not from an economically disadvantaged family, sometimes still doesn't have money to eat. Or time, you know, and it might be that mom forgot to give me the check for lunches this week, you know, or dad, or whatever, you know. There was an emergency and all money went to this and fix the car so they could get to work, and we just don't have it. Lots of situations. Okay, so now we're gonna just talk a little bit about what is differentiation. So you gave me your ideas on your 3x5 card. Differentiated instruction is instruction that responds to learners' needs, either as individuals or even in small groups, because it could be that I have a group of students that have similar needs that could require the same sort of accommodations. Another way to think about it is responsive teaching. So differentiated instruction is responsive teaching. So why should we differentiate? So this statement says if all students in a classroom are instructed at the same level, what opportunities exist to challenge those who are ready to embrace a more rigorous learning environment? What population are we talking about here? The gifted. Lots of times we just think about those that have learning disabilities, that are struggling. Well, the gifted deserve to be challenged as well, and for us to think about them. And some of you may have been identified as gifted in school, and while it certainly is okay on occasion to pair gifted, high achieving with a struggling student, that should not be done all the time, because it's not fair for the gifted student, the high achieving student, to be responsible for always teaching that low student. That's not their job. On occasion, it's a good thing, and they may like to do it. Some of them don't. And if they're okay with it on occasion and they can help, that's fantastic, but not all the time. They should be challenged as well. So don't forget about your gifted population. Learners have different needs. That's why we should differentiate, because they have different needs. And if we care enough about our students as individuals, and we believe that they can learn, we truly believe that, then we're going to try to do what we can to give them access to the content so that they can learn. We're going to provide the necessary scaffolds for them. Not to baby them, not to do it for them, but to provide them with necessary challenge. Did you guys learn about Vygotsky's zone of proximal development? It's that sweet spot where it's challenging enough, like they're motivated to want to try, but it's not so challenging that they're like, I can't, there's no way I can do that, they give up. It's that zone of proximal development. Have you seen this before? Remember what this is called? Anybody? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so Maslow was from back in the 1900s, earlier 1900s. And there are different versions of this, but basically what this demonstrates is these physiological needs are things like food and shelter, physical things. The need for safety, love, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. Before you can move up this pyramid, the needs at the bottom have to be met. If students aren't getting enough food, if they don't have a warm, safe home, they're going to have trouble learning. So we need to provide these things. And some of these things you have control over, some of them you do not. In my classroom, I had food because there were kids that came to me hungry. And so it was important to me. They got to eat something. And so I can't always control their home environment. There are things that I can do and that you can do. So who do you think you should differentiate your instruction for?
Everyone that needs it.
Yeah, everyone that needs it. And even, I was that kid, I made A's and B's in school. If you believe it or not, I made C's in chemistry. I hated chemistry in high school. If somebody ever told me that I was going to teach chemistry, I would have rolled over and died laughing. I hated chemistry with passion. But it wasn't until I got to college that I realized, oh, I get this. And because I struggled with it so much, I think that made me a good teacher because I understood what it meant to struggle with it. But even that kind of person that was sort of average, A's and B's, sometimes C's, still had learning needs. And there were still things that could have been done to really boost me and get me excited about something rather than just saying, oh, well, she can figure it out. You think about all your students. Does that mean you need to have a lesson plan for every student, do something different for every student? No, not necessarily. I mean, not at all. Okay, so you have an activity sheet there, and you see that we've got group hypothesis on your activity sheet, and then findings. And then you have class hypothesis and findings, is that correct? So how are you going to meet all the needs of each of the students in your classroom at the same time? So we're at this hypothesis section. So at your tables, I want you to talk. And can I have you, Kenneth, slide over here, since we'll just do 8 and 8, if you're cool with that. And talk with your tables. I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to jot down your ideas. Write them on your sheet there where it says group hypothesis. Okay? You can eat your M&Ms, by the way, they're for you. If you like.
Oh, yeah.
We can use the Spanish.
What you're hypothesizing is the question, how am I going to meet the needs of all these students?
Can you go back to the M&M color?
Yes.
You did right what they want.
Oh, here, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give this.
So I have a question.
Yes, sir.
How would your lesson have been different if somebody in the class was colorblind?
That's a good question. I don't think that the ability to differentiate colors is integral to this, and mostly it's red, green. Are you colorblind?
No, I'm not
Yeah,
colorblind.
I am.
Colorblind?
That's not bad.
Yeah, it should be. It's mostly red, differentiating between red and green. So there's a lot of color here. What I would need to know if sometimes some colors, or if you have graphics that are moving, students on the autism spectrum disorder sometimes have problems with stimuli. It could be bright colors or sounds or things that are moving. So I want to know that.
Okay.
Just to kind of add on to that, actually in high school, we had a guy in my class who was pretty much colorblind to like most colors. Like he had I forget
Severe?
which ones, it was severe color blindness. And his issue was like he knew that, but he couldn't see like marker colors.
Yeah.
So like writing on the board, most teachers used black markers, but we had this one teacher who loved using colored markers. And he realized like halfway through the year why he could really never see why she was writing, like what she was writing on the board, because he thought her
He
markers.
couldn't see the color at all.
Yeah,
Oh.
he could
Wow.
see it, but like very faintly, because
Oh.
it would like
blend
warp
in.
the color, so he
Yeah.
could kind of see it against the white.
Mhm.
But he thought that the marker was just dying or something, and he couldn't really see it.
Ah,
But
interesting.
he realized halfway through, and she actually refused to change her marker colors, so that wasn't fun. But I think
Still was not responsive teaching, was it?
yeah.
I had a student that was colorblind, it's a female, and I had these red, green, and yellow 3x5 cards that every student had. So as I was teaching, I would, want to know sort of a formative assessment where they were. Green, got it, yellow, sort of, red, I'm lost. And they could show them here, without too much, to do. And so one of my students was colorblind, so I just took 3x5 cards and wrote red, yellow, and green so that she could use that. So yeah, you gotta modify, right? Okay, so come up with your hypothesis as a group. It shouldn't take too long. How are you gonna differentiate your instruction? How are you gonna meet the needs of all these students? What are some things you can do? Set go.
So it's
I would say, look at
Yes,
what
sir.
the different needs are and put those into consideration. Well, it's like, well, that,
Does everybody have
separated
at least one or two
in whatever
needs?
category?
No.
They don't have to be separated by color, it just happens to work pretty good.
No, we don't have to do that.
And so that's
special ed, right?
taking that into
Because I have two
consideration, she's
special
already
ed,
gone
two
and said,
economic
well,
disadvantage,
that
one
is
average.
I have
relatively
one
irrelevant,
average. I have
you can
3
just
special
put it in
ed,
piles.
3 economics or disadvantage, or 3 bad behavior, sorry.
Yeah, I have it.
So I think
And
a lot of this
I
is
didn't think I had any of the
just
others.
taking it into
I
account.
have one.
So right now, all I want you to do is just quickly talk about some ways that you could differentiate, real quick, in general.
How hard
So
is it,
obviously,
like,
we could do
diagnose what the need is, how we do it in classroom? We
banks.
could specifically, but
We started to
We
read
could
those
assess
things
them,
that
and
were
then
not
based on the
ordered.
results of those assessments,
Started writing it.
plan
Sorry.
our lessons accordingly to those students.
Typically, they'll have,
Yeah.
IT or something, so you'll be aware of it before they even step into the classroom, so you don't have to like go, oh, here's a copy of Spanish for you. Like, you already know, so you can put Spanish subtitles on everything, and that way you're not calling out that individual
Any
student.
reminders?
And not only that,
Keep
but
them engaged.
even what you read on a piece of paper,
Yeah.
like their IEP or
Maybe.
whatever they have, even that can't really be translated until you really get to know the student, see the student, so you can talk to other teachers that the students have. And kind of get an idea of, a real-time idea other than what you're reading on like piece of paper.
So like,
So that's a pretty good
get on
framework,
work.
but I think, and some things could get misinterpreted on a piece of paper as opposed to if you actually see the student and interact with the student, because that's just gonna look much different to you, regardless of the piece of paper, than they would come from activities. I think it's very important to, talk to the other teachers, especially if they have teachers that, are differentiated to help them,
You could do like
say like a special needs student has a specific person that they run to, that is a collective doctor, mentor, or something. So talk to those people, not just, rely on just because IEP or piece of paper that says, this is what's going on, this is what they need, this is what parents want. It's more important to me to know exactly in real time what that student needs as it comes from the student that actually deal with them.
And I think part of it is removing your own predetermined concept. Because you can see on a piece of paper, okay, this kid has trust. Well, that could mean something to you. It may manifest completely different in that kid. And so, like you said,
Okay, we're gonna bring it down
you
5.
need to, reach out to people who have had interaction with that student. So is that kind of where we're going with this?
2,
Gestures and then
and 1.
images help.
Okay, hopefully you've got a couple of things written down. I know you can keep going, but I'm gonna stop you there because we're gonna share out some ideas. So over here at this table, Give me one of your ideas. Kayla, what's something that one of your group talked about?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
You're fine. For economically disadvantaged, we talked about providing like missing materials that they may not have, such as pencil, paper, copies of things that they couldn't have printed off at home.
So provide resources
Mm-hmm.
for students? Okay, good. What about something over here?
Okay.
You said, talk to the other teachers to understand, how the students react to other environments, not just in your own classroom.
So try to get some background information. What I'm hearing you say is maybe teachers they currently have, but maybe even teachers that have had them before to get some ideas about what works well with them. Okay, good. All right, back over here, Brianna, which one you got?
For the economically disadvantaged, we said like have food and like school supplies in case they need them.
Okay, so those resources, is there
She
another
already
one?
said-
Yeah, give me another one.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
For the ELO, the like images and like a copy of stuff in their language.
Okay, so visuals and translated versions? Okay, good. Good. All right, look back over here.
Talk to the student and the parents directly, because they may know something, but that way you're also not calling them out in class, like, why can't you read this?
Yeah. So when we think about talking to people, in particular the students, what does that mean that we're doing? We're trying to
Building a relationship.
building a relationship, we're really trying to get to know them, right? How can you know what to do if you don't know them and know what their needs are? I mean, there's some diagnostic things that can happen, but, and I think, I heard Jessica mention this, but you can't always just rely on those things. You gotta talk to people too, right? And talk to the kid, find out. I wanna help you learn.
Yeah, what you read on an IEP or a 504 isn't necessarily interpreted the same to each person. So I think that sometimes teachers rely too much on, especially at the beginning of semester or years, or whatever you call them in high school. I think they look at these pieces of paper and they form their own kind of, well, I have this student that's gonna come in and they're gonna need all of this stuff and I have to do this, and it comes off as they're frustrated by it because of everything, because those are very detailed pieces of paper, which they have to be, understandably. But I think they take what's written in black and white and don't apply that to the actual person. Or they over-apply it. They
Yeah.
just assume because of this piece of paper that they need all of this and that they know the student and they're already.
But we gotta be careful because the IEP is a legal document.
It
You
is.
are bound by law to follow the IEP, but what you're saying is correct, how you interpret that and what that means. So there needs to be good communication between the teacher and the student and the parent and the special education teacher in terms of what does this really mean? What does this look like? And they have IEPs at a glance so that in English they need these things. In science, this, it may not be the same. That it varies subject to subject and they've been able to determine